Something I absolutely love about Gorilla Glacier is how, like Congo Jungle, it tells a moment-to-moment story. And like Congo Jungle, it achieves this largely through weather and lighting effects. It also serves as a symbolic moment in the struggle. It's a no man's land between Kremling and Kong territory. It's a threshold separating the spoiled and unspoiled, between the dead and the living. It's a natural gauntlet that both sides must pass through on their mission. But also, it's like the snow world. This is part 46 of Overthinking Donkey Kong Country. Gorilla Glacier's overworld might just be the most beautiful overworld in the game, but there isn't a whole lot to say about it, unfortunately. It doesn't correspond too well with the island map, but then again, none of them do, so don't look too deep into that. We're so high up you can't see the ocean, but there is some runoff from the glacier, which could potentially have led to the riverbed in Kremkrock Industries, or maybe leads into Clam City in Vine Valley. Seeing as this seems to be behind the face of the island a bit, I'd say the latter is more likely. That's pretty much all there is to it. It's nice, but not much I can really talk about. Also, there's a spooky little demon face in the cave, right here. When it comes to gameplay, there's no overarching theme that I can see, unlike how you could argue Congo Jungle focuses on the core gameplay elements, or Vine Valley showcases the enemies. Like Monkey Mines, there are 2 gimmick levels and the rest is fairly straightforward. For the most part, I feel Gorilla Glacier's focus is on its visuals, more than any set of mechanics or gameplay ideas. At any rate, let's take a closer look at each level. Snow Barrel Blast is a continuation of the foundation set by Barrel Cannon Canyon and expanded on in Vulture Culture and Treetop Town. The level's heavy on barrel work, and there are a lot of neckies and zingers to contend with, but the focal point of the level is easily the weather effects. First thing that stands out is the challenge of limited visibility. And I'm sure that's the point of the snowstorm, but it's certainly not the coolest thing about it. As the level goes on, you can actually watch the storm approach in real time. It's super impressive how they worked all these layers together to make this subtle but intimidating storm overtake the level. Slipslide Ride's kind of a similar deal. The obvious gameplay focus is on the blue and purple ropes, but the thing people remember most is the environment. Slipslide Ride has the distinction of being the only level in the entire game that is 100% unique. The blue and purple ropes never return, nor does the Crystal Cave tile set. I don't count K-Rool's fight when I say that as well. I think I said this in the Slipslide Ride episode, but I'm gonna say it again. It seems to me that this is one of those levels that everyone seems to remember long after they've played the game. I think that's pretty cool. Ice Age Alley is the final slice of bread in the snowstorm sandwich. The storm that began in Snow Barrel Blast is still raging by the time we get out of the cave. And just as we saw it approach in real time, we get to watch it recede in real time. This level's gameplay revolves around swinging ropes and has an impressive variety of enemies, but for me, the key element of gameplay is for sure Expresso. Once again, he's easy to miss, but once again, this level is built to showcase his talents, and he definitely makes it much more fun. Croctopus Chase goes in the same category as Stop and Go Station and Temple Tempest, being a pretty high tension level. It's fairly self-explanatory. You're running from the blue croctopuses through tight, twisting underwater tunnels. The palette swap of the standard water level achieves so much in the way of atmosphere with so little. It's visually stunning and memorable, and really drives home just how cold that water would be. Torchlight Trouble is Squawks' only appearance, but unlike DKC 2 and 3, he's not playable. In this level, he holds a torch to light your way through the dark cave. Despite this level having one of the lowest enemy counts, Torchlight Trouble is still quite perilous, and one you're going to want to take pretty slow. The final level, Rope Bridge Rumble, is the second of 2 treetop levels, and that's for sure the main focus of this level. But from a gameplay standpoint, it relies heavily on the tires. The boss is really naughty, a giant red naughty who mixes it up with some high jumps, but is otherwise no different from very naughty. I talked before about how Gorilla Glacier tells one cohesive narrative from level to level. To me, this is how it all shakes out. The Kongs follow the trail from the forest to the foot of the glacier. It's a perilous journey to start with, made even worse when the storm hits. Eventually, the cold, slippery surfaces and poor visibility get too much for them, and Donkey and Diddy seek shelter in a nearby cave. Despite the abundance of crystals, this cave doesn't seem to be mined. It could be that they're made of ice. Originally, I was against this idea, but after looking into it a bit more, I think there could be some merit to it. My first argument was the shapes of the crystals, but turns out ice does crystallize, and I probably should have known that. As for the color, ice can be blue when there's less oxygen in it. I can't really explain the purple though, so maybe they are crystals like we're inside a giant geode. Something that's interesting about Slipslide Ride are the ropes. They're reminiscent of rock climbing ropes, so it's possible that the Kremlings have been using this cave as a pathway from one side of the glacier to the other, out of the wind and snow. The Kongs make it to the end of the cave, only to find that the storm is still raging. They press on, crossing the infamous Ice Age alley with the help of expresso. But as the storm subsides, the Kongs fall into the glacial runoff. I've got to assume they fell into the runoff because no one would willingly jump into glacier water. There, the croctopuses chase the Kongs from their home, and the Kongs make it out of the water onto the other side. Wet and freezing cold, they again seek shelter in a nearby cave. That's where they find their friend Squawks, who had been kidnapped and was being forced to help the Kremlings build their tunnel through the mountain. Squawks helps the Kongs through the cave, lighting their way with his torch. They see the remnants of the construction operation, still functioning, and watched over by a skeleton crew of high-level Kremlings. It looks like the Kremlings were in the middle of constructing a tunnel through the mountain, likely to pass from Kremkrok to the edge of Vine Valley, circumventing all, or at least most of the glacier altogether. Who knows whether or not the Kongs would have succeeded if this tunnel was in place. When they reach the other side, they find themselves in another treetop village, more mysterious than the first. What could it be doing here so far up the mountain, and who lives in it? There's every chance that at different times of the year, the glacier is a much less hostile place, and maybe even more akin to the forest we saw in Vine Valley. I theorized that it was the Mankeys who may have lived up here, or even other Kongs once upon a time. But honestly, I don't think it matters. I know it kinda goes against the whole point of this series, but it's good when some things are left ambiguous. We don't need to know the answers to everything. The trail leads the Kongs to the 4th checkpoint, guarded by Really Naughty, a huge version of the red naughties that run in the millstones. They defeat him and descend to the other side of the glacier, down into true Kremling territory. Gorilla Glacier is pretty light on the world building, and is a more present, moment-to-moment experience. If I were to shoehorn it into a plot beat, it definitely marks the midpoint of the game. Snow Barrel Blast is the literal midpoint in terms of levels, and the world itself feels like a symbolic moment. Yes, it's a sort of threshold, but more than that, it's the beginning of a literal and metaphorical descent for the Kongs, down into the factories, the caves, the dark night of the soul, and the third act of their adventure. That was part 46. I don't really remember much about making these episodes. The last 3 worlds were all sort of done at the same time. Not exactly, but I wrote Chimp Caverns before I was even half done with this world, and so they're all kind of blurred together to me. I remember having fun making them, but that's about it. I'm not sure if they're any better or any worse than the ones that came before, and I don't much feel like going back and rewatching them. Not enough time has passed. Anyway, 2 more recaps and we're on to the final level. What are your thoughts on the recap episodes so far? I really wanted to remake those earlier episodes, but I also think it's important to preserve your early works and not try to rewrite your own history. These recap episodes are sort of a compromise for me, but more than that, they're a crash course for anyone that wants to be caught up to speed on the series without having to sit through 39 episodes. Love them or hate them, there's 2 more coming. We're almost done, guys. Thanks for being here with me.